Women are working hard in professional roles these days, and in the tech field, opportunities abound. But how are they doing compared to men, and what needs to happen to give them professional development and move them toward equality? Let's hear from women in tech who are strong advocates for ensuring that other women get their fair share.
Alex Qin works as an engineer for a tech training company called Skillshare, and she's here to talk about her own experience climbing the tech ladder. Welcome to BK Live.
Thank you. Thanks for having me.
Pleasure. And Courtney Burton is a lead product designer at Kickstarter, and we're so glad to have you here, Courtney. Welcome, welcome, and welcome.
Thank you so much.
All right, ladies. Hey.
How shall we start? Why don't we have each of you tell us a little bit about your own journeys into the tech world? Courtney, let's start with you.
Sure. So, yep, I'm Courtney, and I'm a product designer at Kickstarter. I actually got my degree in English and thought I wanted to be a lawyer, so I worked in the legal field for a year and realized very quickly that this was not the place for me. And so I decided to actually go back to school for graphic design, and then got my first job out of design school at an agency called Razorfish. And then from there, just kept going.
Kept going.
Yeah.
I like how she got the degree, went into the field, was like, no,
Yeah.
not for me. Let's go back.
I feel as though that happens a lot in law, in particular. Not surprisingly.
Yeah.
Alex, how about you?
Yeah, I started programming in college. I originally wanted to be an astronaut, so I started the engineering program at my school, and one of the requirements was Introduction to Programming. And I loved it so much. I felt like I could be really creative and analytical at the same time. So I went down that route and majored in computer science. After graduating, started working in the tech sector in New York as a software engineer, mostly working on websites for companies, so building websites, handling the interactions users have with the websites. After a few years of doing that, I became really passionate about education. So I left my software engineer job and joined a nonprofit called Coalition for Queens as their curriculum director. They run a free programming school for adults from underrepresented backgrounds in tech. Had a great experience there, then decided I wanted to widen my impact on education, which is why I joined the Skillshare team. Skillshare is an online learning platform, and I lead an engineering team there. On the side, I'm also a teacher. I recently started a new educational program called the Code Cooperative, and I teach programming as a means to creating social change, and just launched the pilot with the Fortune Society, which is a nonprofit that does work mostly with prison reentry.
So I just want to back up just a little while here, because you obviously have the tech part of it. Why was it so important to sort of add the educational component as well? And then furthermore, how has that sort of been received on a breakdown so far as gender is concerned? I was reading this the most amazing article last evening, and one of the things that the article was saying was that, you know, Virginia Tech engineering grads, there were this many women versus men, but they said, hey, you know, our feeder school is this public school system. And if you go to that public school system, there are, you know, 5 women for every 53 you know, young men that are in this program. And in that middle school, you know, system is saying, well, hey, we don't have the robotics courses, the sort of grassroots educational things that are bringing women in. So, you know, what do you say to that?
Sure. Well, to answer your first question, I became interested in education because after spending a few years as a professional programmer in the New York tech scene, I became very disillusioned with how women and people of color were treated, and I almost considered leaving the field, which is what 50% of women do in tech at some point in their career. And but I'm very stubborn, so I decided I'm not going to do that. Instead, I'm going to try and create positive change within this community, and I realized that teaching people who don't fit the status quo would be a good way to eventually change it. And then to answer your second question, yes, there's a lot of conversation about how the lack of representation of women in programming is due to the fact that there's not enough opportunities for them as young girls to learn about interests in scientific fields. However, these theories have kind of been debunked, and it's not actually a pipeline issue. And we found that even if we have an equal number of women and men entering the tech field, women continue to leave, and it's been referred to as the leaky pipeline.
So I believe we have
I'm really glad I answered that question.
Yes.
I'm really glad you asked that question for me.
I believe we have a chart that is going to show us kind of the breakdown at lots of these global tech companies, or not the exact breakdown, but how many women are in tech jobs and leadership jobs, and then they represent the total workforce here. Courtney, I saw you kind of nodding vigorously as you're doing right now. Yeah. How do you feel within your workplace about the divide?
Yeah, I mean, it definitely can be difficult. Being a woman in tech is not easy. It's very, I say all the time, I'm so tired all the time. And it's not exactly from my work. It's about, a lot of it is just from working in the tech industry as a woman. You constantly feel like you're fighting an uphill battle, and I was nodding my head yes, because there are so many times where I've thought I don't want to work in the tech industry anymore, and I'm a stubborn person as well, which is also why I was nodding my head of like making a decision for myself that no, I want to keep going, and I really want to try to make a change within the confines of constraints of the company that I'm in, and yeah, just keep pushing forward on that.
So how do we do it? How do we address this leaky pipeline? Yeah.
I think the first step is for companies and organizations in tech to realize the importance of diversity and inclusion efforts. There's a lot of talk around diversity and inclusion in tech right now, but a lot of people really talk about it as either a PR move or some kind of charity. And the first step is acknowledging that that's really not the case. Diversity within the tech force is really important because this is always the first thing I say, because some people care about this more. More diverse teams lead to more money and more innovation. So that's important. Secondly, if we don't have teams that build products who reflect the population that use them, that leads to really big blind spots. And we get things like Apple releasing Apple Health without menstrual cycle tracking, or Apple Maps without public transportation, or this team of all-male engineers that built a airbag that ended up killing more women because they never tested with women in mind.
Female bodies.
Or when Google first released Google Photos, their image recognition algorithm actually matched tagged gorillas as black people.
Yeah.
So you need diverse teams working on products that everyone are going to be using. And lastly, we need to acknowledge that the lack of diverse representation in tech is just one of the ways that systemic discrimination manifests itself, and that we need to be fighting that all the time.
So we obviously need to fight on a lot of different fronts.
Yeah.
Okay, you want to add on?
No, I think she
nailed it.
Yeah, she nailed it. She keeps nailing it.
She's like yes, yes, and yes, and yes. So
second.
what are the next steps education-wise?
Certainly. So there's definitely a lot we can do in terms of education, so addressing the first part of the pipeline, so getting more kids, more young adults interested in programming. There's a lot of promises that the U.S. government has been making about like how much money we're pouring into CS education for all public schools.
This is like $4.1 billion over the next 12 years, I believe.
Because right now, at least in New York City, only 10% of public high schools have any kind of computer science education. So that's one big thing we can do.
Books. It's like one thing at a time. Sometimes.
We have to go start talking to Kickstarter and Skillshare to help us out.
Yes.
Help us out. So.
Yes. Please.
Okay.
Please. What else, Courtney? Anything else come to mind there?
Well, as far as education, I mean, you are the expert on that, definitely. I think that at Kickstarter, we've made a really concerted effort of trying to hire more people of color and more women in general. And I think that has meant that we are hiring a lot of people that are actually more junior because they're not represented in more senior positions. So, but we were actually discussing earlier that that's actually that can be a really great thing, that even though junior engineers are perceived as like, aren't going to be really strong impact as far as initial first contributors, but it's actually, in some
In the long
degree,
run.
yeah, in the long run, it's actually better to train them in the ways that you want to be working as a company instead of having to retrain people that are set in their ways or have learned how to code in a way or like know old technologies, that it can also be better. So.
Awesome.
We're gonna have to work on this brain drain. So, ladies, thank you so much for joining us today. We do appreciate you, and I think we learned a lot.